The alarms screamed through the corridors of the New Horizon as Lisa Kane checked her rifle one last time. The exploration ship shook violently under enemy fire, and sparks flew from damaged control panels. Through the viewport, she could see them, massive alien ships that looked like flying beetles, their dark hulls gleaming with weapon ports that glowed like angry red eyes. "How many are there?" Captain Ryan Clark shouted over the noise, his face grim as he watched the tactical display. "Too many," replied Pete Rodriguez from his engineering station. His hands flew over the controls, trying to keep their shields up. "These aren't like anything in our databases, Captain. Their weapons are tearing through our defenses like paper." Lisa gripped her weapon tighter. She had fought in 3 different conflicts across human space, but nothing had prepared her for this. The aliens had appeared out of nowhere, dropping out of faster-than-light travel right on top of them. No warning, no communication attempts, just pure, overwhelming violence. The ship lurched again, and Amy Walsh, their medic, stumbled against the wall. "Hull breach on Deck 3, she reported, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "I need to get to the injured." "Negative," Lisa said firmly. "It's too dangerous. These things are boarding us." As if her words had summoned them, the lights flickered and went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Through the deck plating, they could hear the distinctive sound of cutting tools. The aliens were coming through the hull. Captain Clark drew his sidearm. "All hands, prepare to repel boarders. Lisa, take point." Lisa nodded and moved toward the corridor that led to the breach. She had trained for this scenario countless times. But training and reality were very different things. The cutting sounds grew louder, and then stopped. For a moment, everything was silent except for the hum of the emergency power and the distant sound of damaged systems sparking. Then the wall exploded inward. The aliens that poured through the breach were like nothing from human nightmares. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with bodies that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and an armored beetle. Their skin was dark and shiny, covered in natural armor plates. Each one carried weapons that hummed with energy, and their eyes glowed with an intelligence that was both alien and terrifyingly focused. Lisa opened fire immediately. Her rifle barked in the confined space, and her first shots struck the lead alien center mass. The bullets bounced off its natural armor without leaving so much as a scratch. The creature turned its attention to her, and she saw something that chilled her blood. It was smiling. "Primitive," it said in perfect English, its voice like grinding metal. "How disappointing." The alien's weapon discharged, and Pete Rodriguez screamed as the energy beam cut through his shoulder. He fell to the deck, clutching his wound. Amy started to move toward him, but another alien blocked her path. "Stay back," Lisa ordered, but she knew it was useless. More aliens were pouring through the breach, and their weapons were clearly superior to anything the humans carried. Within minutes, the fight was over. Captain Clark lay dead near his command chair, his body still smoking from an energy blast. Pete was unconscious from blood loss, and Amy knelt beside him, trying to stop the bleeding with her bare hands. 3 other crew members had been killed in the first few seconds of the fight. The lead alien approached Lisa, who still held her rifle despite knowing it was useless. Up close, she could see that its armor was decorated with symbols that might have been rank insignia or battle honors. This was clearly their commander. "I am Zek Thor, war leader of the 3rd Vorthak Fleet," it announced. "You will surrender your weapons." Lisa looked into its alien eyes and saw cruel amusement there. This creature enjoyed the fear and helplessness of its enemies. She slowly placed her rifle on the ground, then reached for her sidearm and combat knife. "All of them," Zekthor commanded. She handed over her pistol, then hesitated at her knife. It had been with her through every deployment, every battle. The handle was worn smooth from years of use, and the blade had saved her life more than once. Zekthor noticed her hesitation and stepped closer. With one clawed hand, it plucked the knife from her belt. "Crude," it said, examining the steel blade, but perhaps useful as a reminder of human weakness. It tucked the knife into its own gear. "You killed my captain," Lisa said quietly. "You killed my friends." "Yes," Zekthor replied without emotion. "And I will kill many more before. This war is finished. Your species is soft, dependent on tools that break easily. When those tools are gone, you have nothing." Lisa said nothing, but she memorized every detail of the alien's face. The way its mandibles moved when it spoke, the pattern of scars on its armor, the casual cruelty in its glowing eyes. She would remember all of it. "Secure the prisoners," Zekthor ordered its soldiers. "The soft ones will serve as examples to their kind." As the aliens bound her hands with energy restraints that hummed against her skin, Lisa watched them work. She noticed how they moved, how they organized themselves, how they communicated with quick, chittering sounds. Even in defeat, her military training kept working. Information was a weapon, too, and they couldn't take that from her. Amy and Pete were dragged to their feet, along with 5 other surviving crew members. The aliens herded them toward the breach in the hull, where a boarding craft waited. Lisa took one last look at the new horizon, at Captain Clark's body, at the ship that had been their home. "Move," one of the aliens commanded, shoving her forward, with the butt of its weapon. Lisa stumbled but kept her balance. As they crossed into the alien ship, she caught Amy's eye and gave her a small nod. The medic looked confused, but Pete understood. Even beaten and captured, Lisa was still thinking, still planning. The alien ship was dark and humid, filled with strange smells and the constant chittering of the Vorthak language. As they were led deeper into the vessel, Lisa began counting steps, noting turns, mapping the layout in her mind. Zekthor had been wrong about one thing. When humans lost their tools, they didn't have nothing. They had something the aliens clearly didn't understand: the ability to adapt, to improvise, to find a way forward even when all hope seemed lost. They had taken her weapons, but they couldn't take her training, her intelligence, or her determination to make them pay for what they had done. The Vorthak prison ship was like stepping into a nightmare. Lisa and the other survivors were pushed through corridors that seemed designed to crush the spirit of anyone who walked them. The walls were black metal, covered in sharp angles and hostile designs. Strange symbols glowed with pale light, and the air tasted of metal and something that might have been fear. Pete stumbled beside her, his wounded shoulder roughly bandaged with strips torn from Amy's medical coat. The energy weapon had burned through muscle and bone, leaving him weak and pale. Amy stayed close to him, whispering encouragement whenever the guards weren't looking. "Where are they taking us?" asked one of the other survivors, a young communications officer named Danny Park. "Nowhere good," Lisa replied quietly. She had been counting their steps and turns since leaving the boarding craft. The ship was massive, easily 10 times the size of the New Horizon. It would take hours to walk from one end to the other. Their guards were different from the boarding party. These Vorthak wore simpler armor and carried lighter weapons, but They moved with the same predatory grace. Lisa noticed they always traveled in pairs, and they seemed to communicate through subtle changes in their chittering sounds. The group was led to a large holding area filled with cages. Each cage was barely large enough for two humans to lie down, and the bars hummed with the same energy that powered Vorthak weapons. Other prisoners were already there, humans from different ships, all wearing the same expression of defeat and despair. "Fresh meat," called out one of the prisoners, a bearded man with burn scars on his arms. "Welcome to the Blood Claw, the jewel of the Vorthak fleet. Hope you said goodbye to sunlight, because you're not seeing it again." The guards shoved Lisa and Amy into one cage, Pete and Danny into another. As the energy bars activated, Lisa felt a strange tingling sensation that made her teeth ache. She tested the bars carefully, pulling her hand back when the energy field shocked her. "Don't bother," said the scarred man from the cage across from them. "Jake Thompson, formerly of the cargo hauler Lucky Strike. Been here 4 months now. Those bars will fry you if you try to force them." "4 months?" Amy whispered. "What do they want with us?" Jake's laugh was bitter. "Entertainment, mostly. They like to watch us break down. Sometimes they take people for what they call experiments. Sometimes they just watch us fight each other for food. The Vorthak think humans are animals, and they treat us like animals." Lisa studied the other prisoners carefully. Most looked broken, their eyes empty, and their movements slow. But a few still had fight in them. Those were the ones she would need to remember. "You're military," Jake observed, watching Lisa examine their surroundings. "Army? Navy?" "Marines," Lisa replied. "Sergeant Lisa Kane." "Well, Sergeant, better forget that rank. It doesn't mean anything here. The only thing that matters is staying alive long enough to—" Jake trailed off, shaking his head. "Long enough to what?" Lisa pressed. "Nothing. Just stay alive." But Lisa could see it in his eyes. Jake was planning something, just like she was. The question was whether he had given up hope or was just being careful about who he trusted. Over the next few days, Lisa learned the routines of the ship. Guards changed shifts every 8 hours, always in pairs except for a brief moment during the transition. Food came twice a day, a gray paste that tasted like metal but provided enough nutrition to keep them alive. The lights dimmed for 6 hours out of every 24, which the prisoners had decided to call night. During one of these night periods, Lisa heard quiet sobbing from a nearby cage. A young woman named Beth Cooper was crying into her hands, her shoulders shaking. She had been captured only a week ago when her research station was attacked. "Hey," Lisa whispered. "Beth, look at me." The woman raised her head, her face streaked with tears. "They killed everyone else," she sobbed. "My whole team, 15 people, and they killed them all just because they could." "I know," Lisa said, softly. "They killed my captain too. Good man. Didn't deserve to die like that." "How do you stand it?" Beth asked. "How do you stay so calm?" Lisa was quiet for a moment, thinking about Captain Clark, about her fallen comrades, about the knife that Zekthor had taken from her. "I stay calm because getting angry won't bring them back. But remembering them will help me make sure their deaths mean something." "What do you mean?" "I mean these bugs made a mistake when they took us prisoner instead of killing us outright. They think humans are weak because we rely on tools and weapons. But they don't understand that tools are just extensions of human intelligence. Take away our guns and we'll make new ones. Take away our ships and we'll steal theirs." Amy, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Lisa, these aren't human weapons we're talking about. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Even if we could somehow escape these cages, how could we possibly fight them? Lisa smiled grimly. The same way humans have always fought superior enemies. We adapt, we improvise, we use their own strength against them. She had been watching the guards carefully, noting their behavior patterns. The Vorthak were clearly an advanced species, but advancement often came with weaknesses. They relied heavily on their technology, so much so that they seemed to have forgotten how to think creatively. "Jake," she whispered to the cage across from them. "You said you've been here 4 months. What do you do for work detail?" Jake was quiet for so long that Lisa thought he had fallen asleep. Then he spoke. "Engine maintenance. Basic stuff. They don't trust humans with anything important, but they need extra hands for routine work." "What kind of tools do they let you use?" "Simple things. Cleaning equipment, basic repair tools. Nothing that could be used as a weapon." He paused. "Why?" "Because every tool can be a weapon if you know how to use it," Lisa replied. "And every weakness can be exploited if you're patient enough to find the right moment." She spent the rest of the night cycle thinking about what she had observed. The Vorthak were confident, perhaps overconfident. They saw humans as primitive animals, which meant they underestimated human intelligence and resourcefulness. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake was keeping the prisoners alive. Every day the humans stayed alive was another day to learn, to plan, to prepare. The Vorthak thought they were slowly breaking down their captives' spirits, but what they were really doing was giving those captives time to study their captors. When the lights came back up and the guards brought their morning meal, Lisa watched them carefully. She noticed how they moved, how they held their weapons, how they interacted with each other. One guard seemed younger than the others, less sure of himself. Another moved with a slight limp, favoring his left side. Information was power, and power was something that could not be taken away as easily as weapons. The Vorthak had made the mistake of assuming that disarmed humans were helpless humans. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The breakthrough came during Lisa's second week aboard the Bloodclaw. She had been watching the guards carefully, noting their individual behaviors and patterns. Most of the Vorthak treated the human prisoners like dangerous animals, keeping their distance and showing only contempt. But one guard was different. His name was Crix, and he was younger than the others. Lisa could tell by the way he moved, less certain and aggressive than his companions. While the other guards enjoyed taunting the prisoners or threatening them with their weapons, Crix seemed uncomfortable with the cruelty. The opportunity came when Crix was assigned to distribute the daily food rations alone. The other guard had been called away for some emergency, leaving the young Vorthak to handle the prisoners by himself. He moved nervously from cage to cage, sliding the metal bowls through the feeding slots. When he reached Lisa's cage, she spoke quietly in English. "Thank you." Crix paused, his large eyes focusing on her face. "You should not speak to me, human. I just wanted to say thank you for treating us with dignity," Lisa continued, keeping her voice respectful. "Not all of your people are so kind." The young guard looked around nervously, then moved closer to the cage. "You are enemy combatants. I do my duty, nothing more." "Of course," Lisa agreed. "You're just following orders. I understand that. In my military, we call that honor." Honor. Crix's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion. "What do you know of honor, human? Your species is primitive, violent. You fight with crude weapons and savage tactics." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "We do fight savagely when we have to. But we also have codes of conduct, rules about how to treat prisoners, how to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I assume the Vorthak have similar traditions? Crix was quiet for a long moment. The old ways spoke of such things, he said finally, but the War Council teaches that weakness toward enemies is itself a weakness. The old ways, Lisa repeated. Were those the traditions of your ancestors? Before Crix could answer, another guard appeared at the end of the corridor. The young Vorthak quickly moved away from Lisa's cage and finished distributing the food without another word. But Lisa had seen something in his eyes. Doubt. Over the following days, Lisa carefully built on that foundation. Whenever Crix was on duty, she would make small, respectful comments. She asked about Vorthak culture, their history, their beliefs. She never pushed too hard or asked too many questions, but gradually, the young guard began to respond. Your people have been at war for a long time, Lisa observed during one of their brief conversations. 3 generations, Crix replied. Since the expansion began, we have conquered 12 species, brought order to dozens of star systems. That must be difficult, Lisa said carefully. Being away from home for so long, fighting wars your grandparents started. Crix's antennae twitched, a sign of agitation that Lisa had learned to recognize. We do our duty, he said, but there was less conviction in his voice than before. Of course you do. That's what makes you honorable. Lisa paused, then added quietly, Do you have family at home? People waiting for you to return? A clutch sister, Crix admitted after a moment. She tends the food gardens in the southern provinces. She says war has made the soil bitter, that nothing grows as well as it once did. Lisa nodded sympathetically. War does that. It changes everything, even the things far from the fighting. My grandmother used to tell stories about her vegetable garden during the last big war. Said the tomatoes never tasted the same after her son went off to fight. Your grandmother, she was a cultivator as well? Yes. She believed that growing things was just as important as protecting them, maybe more important in the long run. These conversations were dangerous, Lisa knew. If the other guards found out, both she and Crix could face severe punishment. But they were also necessary. The young Vorthak was her first real intelligence source, and possibly her first ally. It was during their 4th conversation that Crix told her about Dr. Helen Carter. There is another human, he said quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't being observed. A female, older than you. She is kept in the research section. Lisa's heart jumped. Helen Carter had been listed among the dead after their ship was attacked. Is she hurt? What are they doing to her? The science cast studies her, Crix explained. They wish to understand human biology, human psychology. She is resistant to their methods. Where in the research section? Lisa pressed. Crix looked nervous. I should not speak of such things. If war leader Zekthor discovered I had told you... I understand the risk you're taking, Lisa said sincerely. But she's my friend, my responsibility. If there's any way to help her... The young guard was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, so softly that Lisa had to strain to hear him. Level 7, Section 12. But it is heavily guarded. Even if you could somehow escape your cage, you would never reach her. Maybe, Lisa agreed. But knowing she's alive helps. Thank you. That same week, Lisa made contact with Jake Thompson during one of the work details. Jake had been assigned to clean the corridors near the engine section, while Lisa was tasked with maintaining the air filtration systems. It was the first time they had been able to speak privately since arriving on the ship. "You've been asking questions," Jake said as they worked side by side, scrubbing grime from the ventilation grates. "The guards are talking about it." "Good. Questions or bad questions?" Lisa asked. "Depends on your perspective. That young one, Crix, he's been acting strange. Less aggressive, more thoughtful. His squad leader is starting to notice." Lisa paused in her scrubbing. "How do you know all this?" Jake smiled grimly. "Because I've been here longer than anyone else. You pick up the language after a while, start to understand their social dynamics. The Vorthak aren't as united as they pretend to be. There are factions, disagreements about how the war should be conducted." "What kind of disagreements?" "Old guard versus new thinking. Traditional honor codes versus efficiency at any cost. Some of the younger Vorthak remember the old ways, when their species had rules about warfare and treatment of prisoners. But the current leadership believes those traditions are weaknesses." Lisa absorbed this information carefully. "What about the ship itself? Have you learned anything about its vulnerabilities?" "Some," Jake admitted. "The engine system is incredibly advanced, but it's also incredibly complex. They need constant maintenance to keep everything balanced. Too much power to the weapons, and the life support starts to fail. Too little power to the shields, and the whole ship becomes vulnerable. Sounds like they're pushing their technology to its limits." "Exactly. And that creates opportunities for someone who knows what they're doing." Jake looked at her meaningfully. "Someone with the right knowledge and the right motivation." As they finished their work detail and were escorted back to their cages, Lisa felt a spark of hope for the first time since their capture. She had an ally among the guards, intelligence about the ship's systems, and knowledge of where Dr. Carter was being held. More importantly, she was beginning to understand her enemies. The Vorthak were not the monolithic force they appeared to be. They had doubts, disagreements, and weaknesses. They were not as different from humans as they pretended to be, and that meant they could be defeated. That night, as the lights dimmed and the ship settled into its quiet cycle, Lisa lay in her cage and began to plan. She thought about Crix and his doubts about the war. She thought about Jake's knowledge of the ship's systems. She thought about Helen Carter, somewhere in the research section, fighting her own battle against their captors. The Vorthak had taken their weapons, their freedom, and their friends. But they had also made a critical error. They had given the humans time to think, to learn, and to prepare. Soon, it would be time to show them what humans could do when they had nothing left to lose. 3 weeks into her imprisonment, Lisa volunteered for additional work detail. The announcement came during the morning meal distribution, when a gruff Vorthak overseer visited the holding area looking for workers. "The maintenance section requires additional labor units," the alien announced in broken English. "Humans with technical knowledge will be selected for expanded duties." Most of the prisoners stayed silent, having learned that volunteering often led to harder work or dangerous assignments, but Lisa stood up in her cage. "I have engineering experience," she called out. "Mechanical systems, electrical work, basic maintenance." It was a lie, but a calculated one. Lisa's actual expertise was in combat operations and small unit tactics, but she had picked up basic technical skills during her years in the military. More importantly, she needed access to tools and materials. The overseer studied her with cold, multifaceted eyes. "You are the one called Kane. War leader Zekthor mentioned you might have useful skills." Lisa felt a chill at the mention of Zekthor's name, but she kept her expression neutral. I'm willing to work. Very well. You will report to maintenance, Supervisor Vextil, at the beginning of each work cycle. Failure to perform adequately will result in punishment. The next morning, Lisa was escorted to a different section of the ship. The maintenance area was a maze of corridors lined with storage lockers, workstations, and equipment that hummed with alien energy. The air smelled of lubricants and ozone, familiar scents that reminded her of human machine shops. Supervisor. Vextil was an older Vorthak with scarred armor and missing fingers on his left hand. He looked Lisa up and down with obvious disdain. Another soft human, he muttered in the Vorthak language, not realizing that Lisa was beginning to understand basic phrases. What use could you possibly be? I learn quickly, Lisa replied in English. Give me simple tasks to start, and I'll prove my worth. Vextil handed her a bucket of cleaning solution and a bundle of rags. Clean the tool storage area. Remove all dust and debris from the equipment. Do not touch anything more complex than a simple wrench. It was exactly what Lisa had hoped for. As she began cleaning, she studied every tool and component in the storage area. The Vorthak used energy-based tools for most tasks, but they also kept mechanical backups, wrenches, cutting devices, and diagnostic equipment that wouldn't be affected by electromagnetic interference. More importantly, she found discarded materials that the aliens considered worthless. Broken energy cell housings made of dense metal, damaged conduit wire that still had useful sections, chemical cleaning compounds that could be combined in interesting ways. Lisa worked slowly and methodically, cleaning each item while memorizing its properties and potential uses. A broken plasma cutter housing could become a shiv if the metal was properly shaped. Wire conduits could be twisted into lockpicks or binding materials. Even the cleaning chemicals had possibilities. Some were highly corrosive, others were flammable, when mixed with certain metals. You work carefully, observed a voice behind her. Lisa turned to see Crix standing in the doorway. The young guard looked nervous, glancing around to make sure they weren't being observed. Attention to detail was important in my old job, Lisa replied carefully. And what was your old job, Human Kane? I maintained life support systems on exploration ships, Lisa lied smoothly. When you're in deep space, a small mistake can kill everyone aboard. Crix nodded thoughtfully. The same is true here. This ship travels between stars for months at a time. Every system must function perfectly, or we all die in the void. Lisa seized the opportunity. Have you ever thought about that? How dependent we all are on these machines. Humans, Vorthak, we're all just passengers on ships that could fail at any moment. The Vorthak build superior ships, Crix said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. I'm sure you do. But even superior technology needs constant care. That's why they need maintenance workers, right? Even the best ships break down without proper attention. As the days passed, Lisa continued her work in the maintenance section. She learned the ship's layout by studying repair schedules and work orders. She identified critical systems by observing which areas required the most frequent maintenance. Most importantly, she began collecting materials. A bent piece of conduit wire went into her pocket when Vextil wasn't looking. A small container of corrosive cleaning fluid disappeared into her uniform. Metal shavings from a damaged tool were carefully gathered and hidden. Each theft was tiny, insignificant on its own, but together they were building toward something more. The breakthrough came when she was assigned to clean the ventilation system near the armory. As she worked, Lisa could hear guards moving equipment inside the secured area. More importantly, she could see the energy lock mechanism that secured the door. The lock was sophisticated by human standards, but it operated on principles that Lisa could understand. Energy flowed through a series of circuits in a specific pattern. Interrupt the pattern correctly, and the lock would disengage. Interrupt it incorrectly, and alarms would sound throughout the ship. But Lisa had been watching and learning. She knew the guards' routines, the maintenance schedules, the times when this section of the ship was least monitored, and she was beginning to understand Vorthak technology well enough to make educated guesses about its weaknesses. That night, back in her cage, Lisa carefully examined the materials she had collected. The conduit wire could be shaped into a crude lockpick with enough patience and effort. The metal shavings could be mixed with the corrosive fluid to create a small explosive charge, not enough to destroy anything major, but sufficient to disable electronic systems or create a distraction. "You're planning something," Amy whispered from beside her. Lisa looked at her friend, considering how much to reveal. Amy was loyal and brave, but she was also a medic, trained to preserve life rather than take it. Would she support what Lisa was planning? "I'm thinking about options," Lisa said carefully. "Dangerous options?" "The only kind that matter." Amy was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice barely audible. "How can I help?" Lisa felt a surge of gratitude and affection for her friend. "Keep taking care of Pete and the others. When the time comes, I'll need people ready to move quickly. Can you do that?" "Yes. But Lisa, what are you really planning?" Lisa looked through the energy bars at the other prisoners, at Jake Thompson, who was pretending to sleep while actually listening to their conversation, at the guards who moved through the corridor with casual arrogance. "I'm planning to take back what they stole from us," she said finally. "Our freedom, our dignity, our right to fight back. They think humans are weak because we rely on tools. They're about to learn that the most dangerous tool humans have is our ability to adapt." Over the next few days, Lisa refined her plan. She would need access to the armory to acquire weapons. She would need to disable the alarm systems to prevent immediate retaliation. She would need to coordinate with the other prisoners to maximize their chances of success. Most importantly, she would need to time everything perfectly. The ship was scheduled to dock at a Vorthak fortress world in less than a week. Once they reached that destination, escape would become impossible. As she worked in the maintenance section, cleaning tools and gathering materials, Lisa allowed herself a small smile. The Vorthak had made the mistake of thinking that taking away human weapons would make humans helpless. They were about to discover that humans didn't need weapons to be dangerous. They just needed opportunity, determination, and the willingness to turn everyday objects into instruments of war. The countdown had begun. Lisa's expanded work duties gave her access to areas of the ship that most prisoners never saw. As she moved through the maintenance corridors with her cleaning supplies and basic tools, she began to understand the blood claw in ways that even some of the crew did not. The ship was massive and complex, but it followed logical principles. Power flowed from the main reactor through distribution nodes to various systems. Life support, weapons, shields, and propulsion all drew from the same source, which meant they were all potentially vulnerable to the same types of sabotage. During her third week in maintenance, Lisa discovered the ship's critical weakness by accident. She was cleaning air filtration units near the engine section when Supervisor Vextil received an urgent communication. The old Vorthak barked orders in his native language, but Lisa's growing understanding of their words let her pick up the important details. A power fluctuation in the forward weapons array was causing system-wide instabilities. The engineering crew was being called to perform emergency repairs, and all maintenance work in that section was suspended until further notice. As the area cleared of personnel, Lisa found herself alone near a primary power distribution panel. The casing was open, revealing the complex network of energy conduits that fed power throughout the ship. Warning symbols covered every surface, and the air around the panel crackled with barely contained energy. Lisa studied the system carefully, noting how the power flow was regulated and distributed. The Vorthak had built redundancies into their design, but those redundancies created complexity, and complexity created opportunities for someone who understood the principles involved. The main weakness was heat management. The Vorthak pushed their systems to maximum efficiency, which generated enormous amounts of waste heat. That heat had to be vented through exhaust ports located throughout the ship's hull. If those ports were blocked or damaged, the internal temperature would rise rapidly, forcing automatic shutdowns to prevent catastrophic overloads. More importantly, Lisa realized that the heat management system was controlled by relatively simple, environmental sensors that could be fooled or damaged by someone with the right knowledge and materials. When Vextil returned an hour later, he found Lisa exactly where he had left her, methodically cleaning dust from air filtration screens. He never noticed the small piece of wire she had removed from a secondary control panel, or the way she had repositioned certain sensor connections. "The forward section is clear," he announced. "Resume normal maintenance procedures." "Yes, Supervisor," Lisa replied, keeping her expression neutral while her mind raced with possibilities. That evening, during the prisoners' meal period, Lisa managed to catch Jake Thompson's attention. She used a simple hand signal they had developed. Touching her nose meant, "Pay attention to what I'm about to say." "The guards seem more nervous lately," she commented casually, loud enough for nearby prisoners to hear. "Something about system problems." Jake nodded slowly. "I've noticed that too. The engine maintenance crews have been working double shifts, lots of emergency repairs." "Must be stressful," Lisa continued. "All that complex equipment, so many things that could go wrong." "Yeah," Jake agreed, understanding the subtext. "Especially when you're pushing everything to maximum performance. Systems get unstable when they're running too hot." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Crix and another guard for the evening prisoner count. As they moved from cage to cage, verifying that all humans were present and accounted for, Lisa noticed that the young Vorthak looked troubled. "Is everything all right?" she asked quietly when he reached her cage. Crix glanced at his partner, then leaned slightly closer. "There are rumors," he whispered. "Discussions among the crew about our destination." "What kind of discussions?" "Vorthak Prime is not just a fortress world. It is the center of our empire, where the War Council makes its decisions. When we arrive, there will be a ceremony to display our human prisoners before execution." Shas felt a chill run down her spine, but she kept her voice steady. "A public execution?" "To demonstrate Vorthak's superiority over human weakness," Crix confirmed. "But some of the crew believe it is dishonorable, that prisoners should be dealt with according to the old codes not used for political theater." "What do the old codes say about prisoners?" Crix was quiet for a long moment. "That courage in battle deserves respect, even from enemies. That those who fight with honor should be allowed to die with honor." After the guards moved on, Lisa lay, in her cage, thinking about what she had learned. They had perhaps 4 days before reaching Vorthak Prime, 4 days to act or face public execution on the most heavily defended world in Vorthak space. The next morning brought unexpected news. Dr. Helen. Carter was being transferred to a different section of the ship for enhanced interrogation procedures. Lisa learned this from Crix, who seemed genuinely disturbed by the development. The science cast believes she possesses important information about human military capabilities, he explained during a brief conversation while Lisa cleaned nearby corridors. They intend to extract this information before we reach Vorthak Prime. Where are they taking her? Lisa asked. Interrogation level, Section 9, but it is heavily secured. Even if you could somehow reach that area. I understand, Lisa said quietly. But her mind was already working, incorporating this new information into her developing plan. That afternoon, while working in the maintenance section, Lisa made her final preparations. She had collected enough materials to create several small, explosive devices and a crude but functional lockpick. More importantly, she had identified the optimal targets for sabotage, heat exhaust sensors that could be easily damaged, causing system-wide temperature alerts that would force automatic safety shutdowns. As she worked, Lisa thought about her fallen comrades, about Captain Clark and the crew of the New Horizon. She thought about Helen Carter, somewhere in the interrogation section, refusing to break under alien torture. She thought about the other prisoners, looking to her for leadership and hope. The Vorthak had made several critical errors. They had underestimated human intelligence and adaptability. They had allowed their prisoners to observe and learn about their ship and systems. Most importantly, they had given humans time to plan and prepare while assuming that disarmed enemies were harmless enemies. Tomorrow night, during the ship's quiet cycle, when guard coverage was at its minimum, Lisa would begin her assault on the Blood Claw. She would start by disabling the heat management system, forcing engineering crews to focus on preventing catastrophic overloads. While they were distracted, she would break into the armory and acquire weapons for herself and the other prisoners. Then, she would fight her way to the interrogation section to rescue Helen Carter, and finally to the bridge to confront war leader Zekthor himself. It was a desperate plan, with a low probability of success. But Lisa had learned something important during her weeks aboard the alien ship. The Vorthak were not invincible. They had weaknesses, doubts, and internal conflicts just like any other species, and humans had something that Vorthak technology couldn't account for: the ability to find hope in hopeless situations, to fight when all seemed lost, and to turn desperation into determination. As she finished her work shift and was escorted back to the holding area, Lisa caught the eyes of her fellow prisoners. Amy, Jake, Pete, even some of the others who had seemed broken and defeated. She gave them a small nod, a signal that the time was approaching. Tomorrow, the Vorthak would learn what happened when you cornered a human and took away everything they had to lose. The rebellion began at 0300 hours ship time, when the Blood Claw was in its deepest quiet cycle. Lisa had been lying awake in her cage, listening to the familiar sounds of the night shift, the distant hum of engines, the occasional footsteps, of guards on patrol, the quiet breathing of exhausted prisoners. She waited until the corridor guards completed their hourly check, then carefully retrieved the makeshift lockpick she had hidden in the seam of her uniform. The energy bars of her cage hummed menacingly, but Lisa had been studying their pattern for weeks. There was a brief fluctuation every few minutes as the power cycled through different systems. When the next fluctuation came, Lisa had exactly 3 seconds to work. She slipped the wire pick through the gap between the energy field and the lock mechanism, feeling for the right contact point. Too high, and she would trigger the alarm. Too low, and nothing would happen. She found the sweet spot on her second attempt. The lock clicked softly, and the energy bars flickered off. Amy was already awake, watching with wide eyes as Lisa slowly opened the cage door. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. Too late for second thoughts, Lisa replied quietly. She moved to Pete's cage and repeated the process. The wounded man was still weak from his injuries, but he could walk and had insisted on being part of the escape attempt. Jake Thompson was ready when she reached his cage. "About time," he murmured with a grim smile. "I was starting to think you'd lost your nerve." "Never," Lisa said as she freed him. "Danny, Beth, can you move quietly?" The other prisoners nodded, their faces pale but determined. Over the past few days, Lisa had quietly briefed them on the plan. It was dangerous and probably suicidal, but it was better than waiting for public execution on Vorthak Prime. "Remember," Lisa whispered as the small group gathered in the corridor. "Stay low, stay quiet, and follow my lead. If anyone gets separated, try to reach the escape pods on level 5. Jake knows the way." She led them through the maze of corridors toward the maintenance section. The ship felt different at night, darker, more threatening, filled with shadows that could hide enemies or opportunities. Lisa moved carefully, using her memory of the layout to avoid areas with sensor coverage. They reached the maintenance area without incident. Lisa quickly gathered the materials she had hidden over the past weeks: small explosive charges made from cleaning chemicals and metal shavings, wire tools, and a few basic implements that could serve as weapons. "Phase 1, she explained quietly, as she distributed the charges to Jake and Pete. "We disable the heat management system. Jake, you take the forward sensors. Pete, despite your injury, you handle the aft section. I'll take the central hub. When these go off, the ship's computers will think there's a critical overheating situation." "What if they don't?" Amy asked. "Then we improvise," Lisa replied. "Give me 5 minutes to reach the armory, then trigger your charges. The confusion should give me enough time to break in and acquire real weapons." She checked her improvised lockpick and the small explosive she had crafted for the armory door. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. "See you on the other side," Jake said with a reassuring nod. Lisa moved through the ship like a ghost, avoiding the main corridors and using maintenance passages whenever possible. The armory was located 2 levels down in a heavily secured section near the ship's command center. Getting there undetected would be the most dangerous part of the operation. She encountered her first guard near the central lift shaft. The Vorthak was young and inattentive, more focused on some handheld device than his surroundings. Lisa waited in the shadows until he passed, then continued toward her target. The armory door was exactly as she remembered it. Heavy metal construction with an electronic lock that hummed with energy. Lisa carefully positioned her explosive charge against the lock mechanism, then retreated to a safe distance. According to her calculations, she had about 30 seconds before Jake and Pete would trigger their charges. 28 seconds later, the ship's emergency systems activated. Warning lights flashed throughout the corridor as alarms began wailing. Over the intercom system, urgent voices chattered in the Vorthak language about temperature spikes and system failures. Lisa smiled grimly as she heard the sound of running footsteps, engineering crews rushing to deal with what they thought was a critical emergency. She triggered her own charge. The explosion was smaller than she had hoped, but sufficient. The armory lock sparked and died, and the heavy door swung open with a satisfying clank. Lisa rushed inside and found herself surrounded by more weapons than she had dared to hope for. Vorthak energy rifles lined the walls along with sidearms, grenades, and even some confiscated human equipment. Lisa's heart jumped when she spotted her own combat knife hanging on a display rack, Zekthor's trophy from their first encounter. She strapped on a Vorthak energy rifle and filled her pockets with power cells, then grabbed several sidearms for the other prisoners. The knife went into her belt where it belonged. Finally, she selected a half-dozen grenades and clipped them to her makeshift equipment harness. The sound of approaching footsteps sent her diving for cover behind a weapons rack. 3 Vorthak guards appeared in the doorway, their own weapons. Drawn and ready. Intruder alert in Section 7. One of them reported into his communicator. Armory has been breached. Lisa waited until they entered the room, then opened fire with the energy rifle. The weapon felt strange in her hands, lighter than human guns, with a different balance and recoil pattern. But the principle was the same: point, aim, and pull the trigger. The first guard went down immediately, his armor no match for his own people's weapons. The second managed to return fire, but Lisa was already moving, using the weapon racks as cover. Her third shot caught him center mass, and he collapsed beside his companion. The last guard tried to retreat, but Lisa was faster. She tackled him, in the doorway, driving her knife between the plates of his armor. The blade that Zekthor had taken as a trophy now tasted Vorthak blood. "For Captain Clark," she whispered as the alien died. Lisa dragged the bodies into the armory and sealed the door, buying herself a few extra minutes. The ship's alarms were getting louder, and she could hear more footsteps in the corridors outside. The element of surprise was fading quickly. She made her way back toward the holding area, moving faster now that she was armed. The energy rifle felt good in her hands, and the knife at her belt was a familiar weight. For the first time since their capture, she felt like a Marine again. She found Amy and the others huddled in an alcove near the maintenance section, looking terrified but determined. "Did it work?" Amy asked. "Better than I hoped," Lisa replied, distributing the weapons she had acquired. "The ship thinks it's having a massive system failure. Half the crew is running around trying to fix problems that don't exist." "What's next?" Jake asked, checking the power level on his new sidearm. Lisa looked toward the upper levels of the ship where she knew Helen Carter was being held. Then she looked at her small group of fellow escapees: a wounded engineer, a frightened medic, a scarred cargo hauler, and several civilians who had never held weapons before. "Now we get our friend back," she said, "and then we take this ship." The real fight was just beginning. The battle for the Blood Claw became a running firefight through the ship's corridors. Lisa led her small group of armed prisoners toward the interrogation section, moving fast but carefully through passages that were now crawling with confused and angry Vorthak soldiers. "Contact front," Jake whispered, pointing around a corner where 2 guards were examining a damaged heat sensor. Lisa motioned for the others to stay back, then raised her energy rifle. The weapon's unfamiliar weight still felt strange, but she was adapting quickly. 2 quick shots dropped both guards before they could raise an alarm. "We need to move faster," she told the group as they stepped over the bodies. "The whole ship will be looking for us soon." Amy checked her weapon nervously. "I've never shot anyone before," she admitted. "Hopefully you won't have to," Lisa replied. "But if it comes down to them or us, remember what they did to Captain Clark. Remember what they're planning to do to Helen." They reached the interrogation level through a maintenance shaft that Jake had mapped during his months aboard the ship. The area was more heavily guarded than the rest of the vessel, with pairs of sentries at every intersection and energy barriers blocking the main corridors. Section 9 is that way. Jake pointed toward a corridor lined with security checkpoints. But there's no way we're getting through that without a major fight. Lisa studied the layout, thinking quickly. What's above us? Upper maintenance level. Runs parallel to this section, but it's mostly automated systems and storage. Can we access the interrogation rooms from above? Jake nodded slowly. Maybe. If we can find the right access panels. They climbed back into the maintenance shaft and worked their way toward Section 9. The sound of energy weapons echoed through the ship's hull. Other prisoner groups had apparently started their own breakout attempts, drawing guards away from critical areas. Lisa felt a grim satisfaction. The Vorthak were learning what happened when you gave humans time to plan and coordinate. Even without formal military training, desperate people could become dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. They found the access panel Jake had remembered, leading down into the interrogation section. Lisa carefully cut through the metal, grating with her knife, trying to make as little noise as possible. Below them she could hear voices, Vorthak interrogators, and a familiar human voice that made her heart race. Helen Carter was alive, and she was still fighting. I've already told you everything I know. Helen's voice came through the ventilation system, strained but defiant. Human military doctrine is based on flexibility and adaptation. We don't have the rigid command structures you're looking for. Lies, hissed a Vorthak voice. All species have hierarchies. All militaries have weaknesses. You will reveal them, or your suffering will continue. Lisa motioned for Amy to stay with the wounded Pete while she, Jake, and the others prepared to drop into the interrogation chamber. She had 2 grenades left, plus her rifle and sidearm. It would have to be enough. On my mark, she whispered. Jake, take the guards by the door. I'll handle the interrogators. Everyone else, secure Helen and watch for reinforcements. She pulled the pin from a grenade and dropped it through the access panel, then followed it down into the room below. The explosion shattered the alien interrogation equipment and sent the Vorthak scrambling for cover. Lisa landed hard, but rolled, to her feet, already firing. The energy rifle bucked in her hands as she swept the room, dropping 2 interrogators and a guard who had been standing too close to the blast. Helen! She shouted over the ringing in her ears. Dr. Carter was strapped to an alien examination table, her clothes torn and her face bruised, but her eyes still bright with intelligence and determination. Lisa? How did you— Never mind, just get me out of these restraints. Jake was already working on the alien bonds while Lisa and the others established a defensive perimeter. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridors outside. Reinforcements were coming. Can you walk? Lisa asked as Helen sat up, rubbing circulation back into her wrists. I can run if I have to, Helen replied grimly. These bastards have been trying to break me for weeks. They want information about human psychology, our military capabilities, our weaknesses. What did you tell them? Helen smiled fiercely. That humans get more dangerous when you corner them. I don't think they believed me. The first wave of reinforcements arrived as they were preparing to leave. A squad of heavily armed Vorthak soldiers charged into the interrogation section, their weapons blazing. Lisa and her team returned fire from behind overturned tables and damaged equipment. We can't hold this position, Jake shouted over the noise of energy weapons. Too many of them, not enough cover. Lisa looked around the room, noting the damaged interrogation equipment and the holes her grenade had blown in the walls. An idea began forming in her mind. Dangerous, probably suicidal, but their only chance. The power conduits, she said, pointing to the exposed energy lines that fed the interrogation equipment. If we overload them, the whole section could lose power, Jake finished, understanding immediately. Emergency lighting only, and their energy weapons would have reduced effectiveness. Do it, Lisa ordered. Jake pulled out his makeshift explosive. Charges while Lisa and the others provided covering fire. The Vorthak were advancing steadily, their superior numbers and firepower beginning to tell. Lisa's rifle was running low on power, and they were almost out of grenades. "Charges set," Jake announced. 30 seconds. "Everyone down," Lisa shouted. The explosion was much larger than she had expected. The overloaded power conduits erupted in a cascade of sparks and energy discharge that plunged the entire section into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in an eerie red glow. In the confusion that followed, Lisa led her group through the damaged walls and into the corridor beyond. The Vorthak reinforcements were stumbling around in the darkness, their energy weapons sputtering with reduced power. "This way," Helen said, taking the lead. "I've memorized the layout of this section during my time here. There's a service elevator that leads directly to the command levels." As they moved through the darkened corridors, Lisa could hear the sounds of battle throughout the ship. The prisoner rebellion had spread beyond her small group. Humans were fighting back on multiple levels, turning the Blood Claw into a war zone. "The bridge is 2 levels up," Helen explained as they reached the service elevator. "But it's going to be heavily defended." "How heavily?" Lisa asked. "Elite guards, energy barriers, and war leader Zekthor himself. He's been coordinating the search for escaped prisoners from his command center." Lisa checked her weapons and ammunition. She was down to her last power cell and 2 grenades. The others were in similar shape, armed but running low on resources. "There's something else," Helen continued. "During my interrogation, I learned that we're less than 6 hours from Vorthak Prime. Once we reach that system, there will be no escape. The Fortress world has planetary defense systems that could destroy this ship if it's taken by enemies." Lisa absorbed this information as the elevator carried them toward the command levels. 6 hours to take control of the ship, or face execution on the most heavily defended world in Vorthak space. "Then we'd better make sure we don't fail," she said quietly. The elevator doors opened onto the command level, revealing a corridor lined with the bodies of Vorthak soldiers. Other prisoner groups had fought their way this far, but none had made it to the bridge itself. At the end of the corridor, massive blast doors blocked access to the ship's command center. Lisa could see energy barriers flickering across the entrance, and the distinctive silhouettes of elite guards taking defensive positions. Between her and war leader Zekthor lay the most dangerous part of their journey, but Lisa found herself smiling as she checked her knife and raised her rifle. The alien, who had taken her weapons as trophies, was about to learn what humans could do when they had nothing left to lose. The bridge of the Blood Claw was a fortress within a fortress. Lisa and her team crouched behind damaged bulkheads, studying the massive blast doors that protected the ship's command center. Energy barriers shimmered across the entrance, and at least 8 elite guards were visible through the gaps. "Direct assault is suicide," Jake observed, checking his weapon's power level. "Those barriers will stop anything we can throw at them." "Maybe not everything," Lisa replied, pulling out her last 2 grenades. "Helen, what do you know about Vorthak bridge design?" Dr. Carter thought for a moment. "During my interrogation, I overheard discussions about the command systems. The bridge is heavily shielded, but it needs multiple power feeds to maintain those defenses. If you could disrupt the right conduits, the barriers would fail," Lisa finished. but only temporarily. She studied the corridor layout, noting the power conduits that ran along the walls toward the bridge. Most were heavily armored, but the explosion damage from other battles had exposed some of the secondary feeds. "Here's what we're going to do," Lisa said quietly. "Jake, take Amy and Pete, circle around to the port corridor and wait for my signal. When the barriers go down, you move fast and take out the guards on the left side." "What about you?" Helen asked. "I'm going to have a conversation with War Leader Zekthor." Lisa checked her knife one last time, feeling the familiar weight of the blade that had been taken from her and reclaimed through blood and determination. She moved carefully along the starboard wall, using the damaged bulkheads as cover. The elite guards were focused on the main corridor, not expecting an attack from the flanks. Lisa reached the exposed power conduit and carefully positioned her grenades against the armored casing. The explosion would give her perhaps 30 seconds before backup power restored the barriers. 30 seconds to fight her way through 8 elite guards and reach the bridge. It would have to be enough. She triggered the charges and immediately rolled away from the blast. The power conduits erupted in a shower of sparks and energy discharge, and the shimmering barriers protecting the bridge entrance flickered and died. "Now!" Lisa shouted, charging toward the breach. The elite guards were faster and better trained than the regular soldiers she had fought earlier. Their weapons tracked, her movement with deadly precision, forcing her to dive and roll between cover points. But Lisa had advantages they didn't expect: desperation, fury, and the kind of close-quarters combat training that the Vorthak had never encountered. She closed the distance before they could adjust their tactics, bringing the fight into knife range where their energy weapons became liabilities. Her first target went down with her blade between his armor plates. The second tried to block her attack, but discovered that human combat techniques didn't follow Vorthak rules. Jake and his team hit the left flank at the same moment, catching the remaining guards in a crossfire. The battle for the bridge entrance lasted less than 2 minutes, but it felt like hours. When the smoke cleared, 8 elite guards lay dead, and the massive blast doors stood open. War Leader Zekthor was waiting for them. The Vorthak commander stood in the center of the bridge, surrounded by the bodies of his bridge crew. He had killed them himself rather than allow them to witness his defeat. In his hands he held an ornate energy weapon that hummed with barely contained power. "The primitive human," he said, his voice carrying the same cruel amusement as their first encounter. "You have caused considerable damage to my ship." "Good," Lisa replied, raising her rifle. "I'm just getting started." Zekthor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think your crude weapons can harm me? I am War Leader of the 3rd Fleet, conqueror of 12 species. I have killed thousands of your kind." "But you made one mistake," Lisa said, steadying her aim. "You underestimated us." She fired, but Zekthor was already moving. The alien commander was faster than she had expected, diving behind a control console as her energy blast scorched the air where he had been standing. His return fire forced Lisa to take cover behind the tactical display. "Your rebellion ends here, human," Zekthor called out. "Even if you kill me, my fleet will hunt down every member of your species. We will burn your worlds and scatter your ashes among the stars." "You'll have to catch us first," Lisa replied, signaling for the others to spread out and flank the alien commander. The battle for the bridge became a deadly game of cat and mouse among the control stations and display screens. Zekthor was a skilled warrior with superior weapons and armor, but Lisa had something he couldn't match: the support of her team and the motivation of someone fighting for the freedom of her entire species. Jake managed to disable the aliens, energy weapon with a lucky shot that severed its power feed. Helen used her knowledge of Vorthak psychology to predict his movements and guide Lisa's attacks. Amy and Pete provided covering fire that kept the commander from reaching his backup weapons. In the end, it came down to Lisa and Zekthor facing each other across the bridge's command center. Both were wounded, both were exhausted, but only one would walk away from this confrontation. "You took this from me," Lisa said, drawing her combat knife. "Called it a trophy of human weakness." Zekthor looked at the blade, recognition dawning in his alien eyes. "Impossible. That weapon was destroyed with your ship." "Nothing human is ever truly destroyed," Lisa replied. "We adapt, we survive, we fight back." The final confrontation was brief and brutal. Zekthor lunged forward with his claws extended, trying to use his superior size and strength to overpower her. But Lisa had been preparing for this moment since their first encounter. She sidestepped his charge and drove her knife deep into the gap between his armor plates, finding the vital organs beneath. War leader Zekthor, conqueror of 12 species, died on the bridge of his own flagship with a human blade in his heart. As the alien commander's body hit the deck, Lisa looked around at her companions. They were all wounded, all exhausted, but they were alive, and they were free. More importantly, they now controlled one of the most powerful warships in the Vorthak fleet. "Helen, can you work their communication systems?" Lisa asked. "Give me a few minutes to understand the interface," Dr. Carter replied, moving to the main communication console. "What are you planning?" Jake asked. Lisa looked at the tactical display showing their position relative to Vorthak Prime. "I'm planning to send a message that the Vorthak Empire will never forget." Over the next hour, they established contact with other human ships, resistance cells, and even some Vorthak units that had grown tired of the endless war. Helen used her knowledge of alien psychology to craft broadcasts that exposed the Empire's atrocities and called for uprising across the galaxy. The Blood Claw, now renamed the Human Defiance, became the flagship of a growing rebellion. Species that had been conquered and oppressed by the Vorthak began to rise up, inspired by the example of humans who had turned defeat into victory. Lisa stood on the bridge of her captured ship, watching as a fleet of liberation vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel to join their cause. Humans, aliens, and even some Vorthak who had chosen freedom over tyranny. She thought about Captain Clark and the crew of the New Horizon, about all the people who had died believing their cause was hopeless. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. From the ashes of defeat, something new and powerful had been born. The Vorthak Empire had made a critical error when they decided to take human prisoners instead of simply destroying them. They had given their enemies time to learn, to adapt, and to turn their own strengths against them. War leader Zekthor had been wrong about human weakness. When humans lost their tools, they didn't become helpless. They became creative. When they lost their weapons, they didn't surrender. They became dangerous. The galaxy was about to learn what humans could accomplish when they had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The age of Vorthak dominance was ending, and the age of liberation was about to begin.